You're watching Leafs Morning Take with host Nick Alberga and former NHLer Jay Rosehill. The show starts now.
Welcome back to another edition of Leafs Morning Take. No, I am not Nick Alberga. I'm Zack Phillips, filling in for Nick here today alongside Jay Rosehill, the best producer in the game, producer Vic, back behind the scenes. 35 days away now from the start of the NHL season, Rosie. I can't believe it. 35 days away from opening night in Montreal, October 9th for this Leafs team. So why not talk about some players who have signed here, some players who may sign here, some lineups creations that we like, that we may not like. Dig into all of that here today. See some stuff from the chat, maybe answer some questions there. But I got to talk to you yesterday. How was your day yesterday there, Rosie?
It was good, buddy. 35 days. That's it. That's not a whole lot, man. And we got camp in between there and, you know, a pretty hefty preseason. So there's lots coming down the barrel here. I'm excited, but things are good. Kids are back to school yesterday. I took my oldest golfing after. He's kind of into that, which is kind of my dream. So I'm trying to slowly push that down his barrel so that he's excited about playing golf and stuff. So yeah, things are good, man. It's still nice out, but I have this looming excitement of hockey being on the horizon, which is pretty exciting. I'm pumped for it.
It's kind of the perfect time of the year, right? Like NFL's kicking up this weekend. College football is going into week 2 here now. We're going to start gearing up for NHL camps. Baseball, if that's something you enjoy, playoffs are coming up, so then it's actually meaningful stuff. Like, I don't care about the NBA at all, so that's just out the window for me. But other than that, like this is perfect. Golf is still going on. You could still play. It's a pretty good time of the year. But one thing that isn't great about this time of the year when it comes to the Toronto Maple Leafs, fans, media, whatever, is how everything will start to relate back to Toronto. And Rosie, we got to go on yesterday and talk about Leon Draisaitl, how he signed 8 years, $14 million. And you and I talked about it. That makes sense. Like, Leon Draisaitl is this incredible player. He is one of the top 5 players in the world. He is deserving of that money. He probably could have made more money if it's not for a hard salary cap situation and what they got to sort out for the rest of the team. I've got a bone to pick here, though, with some of the stuff that's going on, because after we finish the show, I get to go online. I get to read everything. I get to listen to other media outlets, talk about the contracts, what they like, what they don't like. Here's people from Edmonton's perspective. I'm starting to get to a point here now where it is becoming frustrating how obvious it is that people around the league, whether it's fans or media or other executives that you read about in these articles when they're anonymously quoted, talk about how, oh, this guy, that's a great deal for Leon Draisaitl. Good for the Oilers. Home run, grand slam for the fans, the team, the GM, all that stuff. Great work by them for signing this guy. 8 years, $14 million. But every time these all get brought back to Toronto, the superstars in Toronto, why does it have to turn so negatively on these players and be this comparison? But also, not only is it a comparison to these guys in Toronto, but every time I'm reading this stuff, it's about how the GM did a horrible job. The GM lost this contract. The players are greedy. The team lost out. The fans lose. The guy doesn't really want to be there. The guy only wants money. Rosie, why is it always in Toronto we're getting the negative end of these things when these guys sign these big contracts? How come it's us who's getting knocked for it, but other teams are getting praised for locking these guys down? And I'm also not saying there's an issue with Draisaitl signing that contract, by the way.
No, for sure. I get what you're saying, but I'll tell you why it is. Toronto is the biggest market in the world. They have the biggest fan base in hockey. And therefore, they're kind of like the Yankees. They're easy to kind of hate on and pick apart and be upset with their fans and chirp off. And you add the icing on the cake to that is that they haven't won since '67. So it's easier to point fingers, poke and prod their fans. You know, when we were playing in Vancouver, they got to change the time so that the people out east can watch it at their regular scheduled time. And that just pisses other people off, right? They're kind of little things like that kind of piss people off. So they're an easy target. People like to rip on the Maple Leafs and their fans. And if they had won a string of Stanley Cups in the last 15 years, it'd be hard to chirp on them. I don't think they get that much scrutiny like they do. But when Leon signs that after being top of the league, and it's, you could say he could have made more elsewhere. They just went to Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals. It's easy to, applaud and say, yeah, that makes sense. And when Austin Matthews signs his, they're like, oh, is he the guy? It's easy to say it's easy for haters to say, well, that doesn't mean they're going to get it done, or does he deserve that, or does anyone deserve it? The Nylander contract, whatever you're talking about, it's just easy to rip on the Leafs. People love doing it. They're a huge market. They get lots of screen time. They get lots of attention, and they haven't won in a long time. So haters are just going to hate. You're just going to pile on to the team because it's easy, because it's fun, because it's the thing to do. And honestly, that's what comes with some of the frustration from Leafs Nation, their fan base, is like, that's why they have such short fuses. That's why they have no patience, because they're so tired of eating shit from everyone else in the league because they haven't won. It's just, you don't have a leg to stand on because you haven't won in so long, to the point where it's getting to be kind of like they're the butt of the joke of most of the hockey talk around the hockey world. When you bring up the Maple Leafs is 67 and how long since you've won again, and you guys think you're the center of the world, and you guys think you're going to win with this, and you just pick apart everything that's going on within the organization because it's fun to do. It's the thing to do. And honestly, there's nothing that's going to change about that until this organization wins a Stanley Cup.
Yeah, I guess it's hard though, because I mean, the Oilers, I know that they went to the Stanley Cup last year, but there's no rings on any of those guys' fingers there, and still receiving the praise. I get it. The first round versus going to the Stanley Cup Finals is different, but if we're going to judge it based on walking away at the end of the season with a Stanley Cup ring, they haven't either. And I guess the other part of this would be, as like Bruce Vic pointing out, he hops on a meeting with some of the other producers yesterday, and he's hearing it from all directions about how our guys aren't signing 8 years and locking in these 8-year deals. Like, is that something that matters to you? I'm not really concerned about it. Like, Matthew signs the 5-6 years. Like, I'm okay with that. 4 years, fine with me. He's here for another 4. He's committing all this time of his career, this huge length of his career, to being here in Toronto. And guess what? He's wearing the fucking C on his jersey now. Like, he's very committed to being here and being a part of this organization. I don't care what the term on the deal says. Maybe he thinks he can outperform what he's done already, and in 4 years he's gonna be able to get more money, and the cap's gonna go up. Maybe it's just a smart business decision. It has nothing to do with the fact that he doesn't want to be here and he wants to leave and wants to reevaluate his options at the end of the 4.
Yeah, I don't think it means that. I mean, we were talking yesterday on Department of Discipline, my other show, about Leon and how he could have probably signed, a 4-year deal and then maybe be making $16 million a year, but he chose that security. And I remember, Wayne Simmons, I used to drive to the rink with him every day, and he was in contract talks, and he signed a longer term deal for less money. And there was a point in time there where he was very underpaid because, he was worth more. He was producing more. The cap was going up, and he could have easily got more money, but he said, no, screw it. I want that off my plate. I want security. I just want to know that I've got this amount of money coming over this amount of years, and I don't even have to think about money. I don't even have to think about contract. I don't even have to talk to my agent anymore. He just wanted to say, there, my family's set up. I can go focus on hockey. That was his prerogative, and his personality said that suits me the best. And Austin Matthews, maybe you sign an 8-year deal and he's like, okay, well, now that's over. Like now, maybe he likes to be motivated by contract years and seeing where he can fit, and he likes to evaluate where he lines up in the league based on going to being a UFA or being an RFA, and seeing what he can command, and just keeping your options open. And maybe that's fuel for him to say, hey, nothing's guaranteed. I got to stay at the top of the league if I'm gonna command this much money. And if I want a new contract and I want to command top dollar in the league, maybe that's his motivation. Maybe that's his competitiveness. Like, there's nothing wrong with it in my mind. And yeah, it opens you up to say, well, maybe I can go wherever I want after. Like, there's nothing wrong with that from a perspective. I would never harp on a player for being that guy or for having that mindset. That's what you deserve. And if you're good enough to have that kind of freedom to make those decisions, then good on you. Leon decided to take 8 years, and he was the kind of guy that said, screw it. I want the security. I want to lock it down and be done with it. Good for you too. And then good for the Oilers, because I mean, there will be a time in year 5 or 6 or 4 where you're like, holy crap, are we ever at a steal here with Leon? Because he could get a lot more, and good for everybody. And that there's a reason to pat a guy on the back and say good on you for that. It doesn't happen very often. Usually the guy takes as much as you can. And I think that's the rule, not the exception, really. So again, it just comes down to people loving to bag on the Leafs. And if they win a Stanley Cup, everyone can throw their middle finger up and say, there you go. Now you don't have that to lean back on, and we can go on. But they're the biggest franchise with the most spotlight who haven't won, and that's going to create a lot of chirps and a lot of friction with the rest of the fans. It's just the way it is, and then the Leafs fans got to get used to it, and they probably are, and they're tired of being used to it, and they want it to change.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe in 4 years at the end of Matthew's contract, the Leafs will have racked up 4 Stanley Cup rings, and then he can go wherever he wants, and no one will be upset here in Toronto. For those of you watching right now, make sure to hit that like button. Subscribe here to the channel if you haven't already. You can catch everything right here at the Leafs Nation 401 on YouTube, Leafs Morning Take, wherever you find your podcast. Make sure to visit theleafsnation.com for any articles, news, and updates regarding the Toronto Maple Leafs. But with that, let's get to the latest. Greta, the opening segment is brought to you by Greta Bar YYZ. For a good time, find Greta, 590 King Street West. Weekly specials, live sports, over 60 plus arcade games. Let the games begin. Go big. Go to Greta Bar YYZ. I know that that's probably where I will be heading this weekend, Rosie, out here. Actually, you know what? I took one of my buddies. He came here to visit me from BC. I said, I got a spot for you. Let's go to Greta. We'll take you there. And he said, oh yeah, we've got one of these. I was like, oh, okay, well, we can bounce around. He said, no, let's go to Greta. It's a good spot. So even a guy who was acquainted with it from out west had to go here in Toronto as well. But yesterday, right after we get off the show, Rosie, signing, of course. I mean, I guess it helps us because, we're breaking up some content here. We get to do the Tuesday show into the Wednesday show, so save some stuff. But Steven Lorentz, 28-year-old center / left winger from the Florida Panthers, signs a PTO with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Last year, he played 38 games with the Panthers. In the regular season, he had a goal, 2 assists for 3 points, but he played 16 playoff games. I believe he averaged 7 minutes and 7 seconds of ice time per game there. He had 2 goals and an assist in the playoffs. 230 NHL games played in his career. What do you make of this signing, the PTO that he's brought in here on? Just kind of an opportunity to give a guy a shot, see what he can bring, a guy who did win a Stanley Cup last year.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with it from my point of view. The PTOs, if you're a team, are fantastic. Like, let's get a guy into camp. And because when you sign a guy, you're like, I don't know, like right now, is Easton Cowan going to make this team or not? And where's he going to fit? And how's this going to look? We don't know. So to sign a bunch of players, then you're just stuck and you're hamstrung a lot of the time. But with these PTOs, you can let the dust settle, see where the chips fall, and then go, yeah, we'll keep you and we'll sign you, or else, hey, thanks, but we're good. And as a player, that's very stressful because you're going in there going, I gotta go absolutely balls out and try to make this team because I don't have a paycheck coming right now. I don't have any guaranteed. I don't have a job, right? It's a tryout. So that's stressful for the player, no doubt. And to go into camp and go through preseason, have the season start, and then get cut loose for that is pretty devastating. Because now where do I go? Now I don't have a home, I don't have a job, I don't have a contract. It's pretty stressful for the player, but for the organization, it's very sweet because you're not committed to them or anything, and you can just see if you need the guy or not. You can just wait and see, which is not a very common thing in pro sports. With this guy, he looks like a big body. I'm not totally familiar with how does he use that big body? Does he crash and bang? Can he skate well? It looks like he kind of covers the gamut. He's pretty well rounded. He can chip in a little bit here and there, and obviously a lot of experience with what he's gone through this last year and the Stanley Cup run they went on. He got chucked in for a good chunk of games too, so he's fresh off a really good experience. I think it's a no-brainer for the Leafs. It's zero risk for them to do this, and we'll see what the kid can do in training camp and in preseason.
Yeah, he comes across to me like a guy who could just be one of those good plug-and-play players in your third, fourth line who plays simple. Like, he's not going to play outside of his means. And you get a coach in here like Craig Berube, all signs would indicate that he's going to ask players to play their game, play a certain way. And a guy like this, it's going to be simple hockey. I mean, it's the cliches, but it's like protecting your own zone, getting the puck out past the blue line, hard in on the forecheck. That seems kind of like what Craig Berube is going to want. It seems like what Steven Lorentz could potentially bring. As far as you mentioned, when it comes from the organization, the player perspective, yeah, this is going to be a stressful time for him trying to stick around in the NHL and the PTO. But I think this is a perfect opportunity for the Leafs here. You bring in a guy who just won a Stanley Cup, was just in a locker room that had that culture where they went back-to-back years to the Stanley Cup Finals. They got to experience it. They went through some long runs. He's obviously only there for one of them, but he's around those guys. He's in that environment. He knows what it's like. He's seen that from an inside perspective. It's not like that just automatically makes you someone who's going to bring a Stanley Cup to a new team, but you're there. You're in that room. You know what it's like. And on top of that, the one thing I've always loved with the Leafs bringing some of these guys to camp is I'm a big fan of internal competition, let alone, like he's fighting for his job and trying to prove it to the other GMs. But maybe this lights a fire under someone's ass who's in camp here, who's going to be looking around going, oh my God, they brought that guy in. Maybe Connor Dewar has to look around and say, I can't just play the way I did at the end of the season last year. And there's nothing wrong with that, but he's got to now elevate. And, a guy like Pontus Holmberg, maybe he starts to worry for his job and he's got to take it to a next level. Maybe this doesn't result in Steven Lorentz playing for the Leafs at all, but it internally pushes other guys who are here. Like I've always been a huge fan of internal competition. I don't know. That's obviously an outside perspective for me. Is that something that kind of looks around in the room and these guys, you could tell it pushes guys along, maybe brings something out of them that you wouldn't have otherwise got?
100%. If you're fighting for your life out there, if you don't know if you're going to be in the NHL, you don't know what roster you're going to be on. You don't know if you're going to be riding on the jet or riding the bus. I mean, you'll have a fire under your ass, and you got guys coming into camp. This big-bodied kid's coming in. He's in his prime. He's 6'4", 216. This big bugger, and he's playing for Coach Berube. You're looking around. You're going, "Holy! I have to stand out. I have to impress." And it lights a fire under you. And there's that internal competition that'll push you a little bit. I mean, that's what they want to see. They want to create their identity early. They want to come out and do the things that they haven't done in the past, the reasons they fell short. They want to negate those problems. And I think that some of the guys that you just mentioned are going to be those types of players that, are they going to win you a Stanley Cup? No. But when you look at the Florida Panthers, where this kid just came from, they had such a well-rounded team that is top to bottom. They all bought into that identity, and they would run through teams and they'd play a system and a style that was conducive to running teams out of a building, to having no holes in it, to not breaking down, to just being consistent and solid. And that kid just learned all that culture. He understands what it looks like, and he can apply that. And if that wears off and he shines, then, he could earn a spot on the roster. And I think that would be, again, we're not talking about world-beating players here. We're talking about kind of bottom six guys and plug-and-play guys, like you say. But when you're talking about a team as a whole, you need those guys to kind of fill in the gaps and plug the holes and become more well-rounded, where an organization can start to find an identity, hopefully under a Chief Berube, that says, this is how we play. We all come together. We all know what it looks like. It's Maple Leaf hockey, name it whatever you want, and try to have that winning formula where you get a group of guys in a locker room and they're all pulling on the same rope, and it can become that magical thing where you go on this run and go, holy shit, we found this special sauce that works. And every team is looking for that. Every GM's trying to put that from paper onto the ice. Every coach is trying to create that in the locker room with the culture and the identity and the mindset of their players. It's difficult to do, but you grab these little pieces and you're trying to put it together and make this nice puzzle. And, a piece like this from a guy who understands, who's seen it and can create that inner competition and maybe wake some guys up to say, I got to do that. I got to be that guy. It's just all positive for the Leafs. Doesn't mean it's going to work or be this world beating, thing that happens, but it's in the right direction, and it doesn't hurt them whatsoever. So I think it's a positive step, and we'll see where the chips fall.
I want to know from your perspective, last thing before we move on to some of the other free agents out there and some of the lineup construction. We just talked about Lorentz. I'm thinking about Oliver Ekman-Larsson, who's now been brought over. Stolars, also from the Panthers, now brought over. Berube won a Stanley Cup. He's brought in here. Every year at the deadline, you hear, like, bring in these veteran players. These guys who've won Stanley Cups, they've been there. They've done that. They've experienced it. This is great to have in the locker room. What impact does this actually have? How important, I guess, maybe is a better way to put it, is it to have these guys who have won Stanley Cups be brought into the room? Like, does this, in your opinion, actually change anything about how the culture is, how the other guys who haven't won cups look at them, look at the game, look at the playoffs, like look at the importance of each game? Because oftentimes we've heard that we've seen the Leafs go out and try to acquire players who have done that and bring them in, and then you hear about it in the media. Is it more of just a fan and media narrative, or is it actually something that matters in the room?
Yeah, it depends on who it is and what their role is, but I'll just give you like an example of of a guy or a team where say things aren't going well, say you've just blown a lead and they've tied it up and then you can't get anything going, the ice is tilted and they score another one and they go up one. Now the life sucked out of the bench, coach is pissed off, they're trying to scramble and figure out who to put out there and what to do that's going to fix this problem and get things going in your direction again. Players like that who have been on the teams, they have like an energy about them, the way they jump over the boards and attack the next shift, the things they say in the locker room. Say you lose a game and things aren't going well, is everyone's head slung down and they're throwing their gear down and they're pissed off and everyone goes into their own little individual hole. Guys that have won and that understand what it looks like, they know how to do it, they know how to respond. And if you get enough guys that know what they're doing, then how you respond to adversity, they know what it looks like. They know what things to do, how to stay positive, how to shake things off, how to respond. Maybe you need to go out and have a huge energy shift and go freaking bury someone or pile into their goalie, start a big scrum, chirp off to their bench and get the boys figured out. Like, we're not just going to lay down and die here. And it's just those little attitude things. They're kind of hard to quantify, but when you got guys that know what it looks like and have been there and don't stress the small things and have the right attitude towards maybe adversity or some losses or a losing streak or how not to get too high when you're winning, all those different things, they add up and they can create a culture in the locker room to be cohesive and to be together and to understand not to get too high, not to get too low. It's not to say you bring in one guy that was barely a part of something special, he's going to make the whole locker room change. I'm not saying that, but those little intangibles sometimes can add up to, creating an environment where guys are processing things the right way, the way that will lead to more wins and better hockey.
That's fair enough. That's why we have you here, Rosie. A little inside perspective. I'm just a guy sitting on the outside, firing off stupid tweets on Twitter and yelling after games on the post game show. So having someone with an actual idea does help out. Let's dig into some of these veteran players who are out there and potentially. The Leafs have some interest in bringing here to camp, whether it's on PTOs or actually sending to the team this year. I've got 4 for you. So we'll play a little game. I thought this was going to be clever based on where we're at with the name of the show and the actual team that we're covering. I called it Take It or Leave It, like morning take, covering the Leafs.
Little
Take
play
it
on
or
words
leave
there,
it.
Zachy boy. Look at you go.
I tried. I put a little bit of effort into preparing for this. I don't know if Nick's coming up with things like that, but I tried. So we got 4. I'll give you each of the guys. We'll go through one by one. Let us know in the chat here as well. Would you take it or leave it? Would you sign this player? Let them go. Let them move on. They can find another team. Let's start here. We started with him yesterday. We talked about him a little bit. Max Pacioretty. So just a brief rundown for those of you who are wondering about him. 35 years old, left hand, left winger, has dealt with some injuries over the past couple of seasons, hasn't had a full off season in about 3 years here now. Just coming off a year with the Washington Capitals, he did have 47 games played, put up 23 points. Rosie, you're in the GM office for the Maple Leafs. Pacioretty's agent calls you. He's looking to come to camp. I'm assuming all these guys, basically, for the sake of it, are coming in around $1 million. Let's just say that as well. Max Pacioretty, do you take it or leave it? Let him walk, or do you give him a shot here?
Yeah, he's the tough one. I would like him as a player, but the health thing kind of worries me. Like, he has not played a lot in the last couple of years. I would need to have a true conversation about, like, what are these injuries? Is this a nagging thing? Have you had surgery? Have you fixed the problem? Are you training at 100% throughout the summer? Is this something that's up in the air? It's a risk, right? You sign him, yeah, it's not a ton of money, But when you look at the roster, I feel like there is a need for a guy like him to come in at $1 million or so. He's been the captain of the Montreal Canadiens. He's got that behind him. I think that would really help in the room to have a guy with that experience level. I think he could alter his game to kind of fill the role that they need. Obviously, he's not, a top gunslinger as he's 35, maybe turning 36, I think, in November.
Yes,
So
correct.
he's no spring chicken, but to fill a role with a lot of experience and responsibility on the ice, I think would be good to have a guy that's responsible on the walls, not turning the puck over, doing those little things right, which he's done for a long time. My big question mark with him though is he healthy or not? And I think that would be, a conversation with the doctors and his old teams and seeing like where is this guy standing, and if you could bring him in on a PTO would be unbelievable. I just don't think that would probably be in the cards for the Pacioretty camp. But I definitely see like possibility and potential to bring him in. I don't think it would be the worst thing at all.
I agree. For me, Pacioretty, 1 year, 1 mil, or around that kind of. Let's try it out. And also, this is a guy like when you kind of give the like prove it title to him. This is very obviously not like a prove your worth, or prove whether or not you're about your career kind of thing. Like it's not that. We know who he is and who he's been. This is a prove, can you still play at 36 years old? I I would take it. I'm in on Pacioretty for the year for the $1 million. I will take it.
I'm
Oh, look at
agreeing. I'm
that.
agreeing with you. If a gun's to my head right now, I'm saying let's go. Let's take it. Let's try this.
Look at that. Producer Vic throwing in some extra work there as well, Rosie. Well, just a full produced show here today. So we'll take it on Pacioretty. Let's move on to the next one. Let's go Matt Martin. Also 35 years old, left hand, left wing. Last couple seasons with the New York Islanders. If you look at last year specifically, he played 57 games, had 4 goals, 4 assists for 8 points. The year before that, he did play 81 games, 7 goals, 12 assists for 19 points. Matt Martin, we're going to assume similar situation there. Term and money, take it or leave it.
Well, Matt Martin's done a phenomenal job of staying in that league and carving out a role for himself and being kind of, considered a tough guy at times, but can also play a regular shift, and just done a fantastic job with, found a home in on the Islanders for such a long time, back to when I was playing, and has racked up a lot of experience. But I just don't think his play is what this team is lacking, is what they're needing. I think they've got kind of their bases covered with some of the things that he would bring, and I would just pass on on Matt Martin. I would leave it, just because I just don't think that his DNA is what this roster is missing.
I'm going to leave it as well there. So you can leave that graphic up, Vic. That is a leave it for me. You mentioned it. There's not much else to add. We're talking about the age where his game is kind of going at this point, and what this team actually needs and what we're missing. It's not like he's filling any holes here. We have Reeves. You saw some of that feistiness out of Nyes and McMahon and McCabe and Benoit. Like we're gonna, Chris Tanev has been added to this roster. We're gonna go out and try to add a guy who's coming here, not to diminish other parts of his game and what he's built his career out of, but he's more of a tough guy to be inserted into this lineup, a guy who's gonna help out some of those young guys. We don't need that anymore. That's not what we're looking for. So leave it on Matt Martin. Next guy, Mike Hoffman. 34 years old, left hand, left wing. He's played on 4 teams in the last 6 years, most recently with the San Jose Sharks and the Montreal Canadiens. San Jose last year, 66 games played, 10 goals, 13 assists, 23 points. The year before with Montreal, 67 games played, 14 goals, 20 assists, 34 points, excuse me. This guy, power play guy, goal scoring, skilled type of forward. I'll just start quickly. It's a leave it for me on him. If I'm going to go the veteran route, I'd rather a guy like Max Pacioretty. Mike Hoffman traditionally has been lacking defensive ability or interest in playing defense, I guess, is maybe another way to kind of look at it. We know allegedly there's been other issues with him in locker rooms. I don't want to speculate too far on that because we don't know for sure, but that has been something that has kind of surrounded him, where he's gone from team to team to team over the last little while. This is not a guy that I need in the locker room. This is not a guy that I need on the team. we're not looking for power play specialists here or anything. And part of the reason I say that, I know we had struggles in the playoffs last year, but like,
Mhm.
come on, Rosie. Like, you got Matthews, Nylander, Marner, Tavares, you add Ekman, Larson, Morgan Riley. You've got other options like Timothy Liljegren, potentially Easton Cowan, or some of these other guys. You better not have some fucking issues on these power play. Like, figure it out with the guys in there. You don't need Mike Hoffman to be your savior. So leave it for me on Mike Hoffman.
Yeah, that's a problem if you got the names you just mentioned and you need Hoffman to come and save your power play. The contracts are signed, the guys are set. If there's no one cut to come and save that power play, I don't know what's wrong with it, but it absolutely is going to come from within if they're going to fix that thing. Mike Hoffman's a leave it for me too. I just don't think he plays a Craig Berube style of hockey. I don't think he'd be cohesive with what they're trying to do in Toronto. He's coming from a garbage team in a garbage market, and I just don't think. I think there's just a risk that he comes to Toronto and it's just nothing about it works. There's nothing but friction. He doesn't fit in. It's not what the team's looking for. Certainly aging like all the guys we're talking about, but just for too many reasons. There's too many cons than pros, and they outweigh each other. And for me, that's a leave it as well.
Okay. We actually have two more. I will go through these quickly here. I've not the best math guy, hockey guy, not math guy. Cal Clutterbuck next, right hand, right winger, 36 years old. Last year with the Islanders, he played 82 games. He had 7 goals, 12 assists, 19 points. The year before, 49 games played, 6 goals, 6 assists, 12 points. One of the league leaders every single year in hits. Uh, this guy would be a depth guy here as well. Is this a player you'd be looking to add to the Toronto Maple Leafs roster this season?
I'll be honest, I haven't dug into him too hard. I mean, like 36 turning 37 in a couple of months. Like, I'm sorry, but are you really going to be running around banging and crashing? I mean, that's a young man's game. It's not. You start to feel every hit and every paste against the glass at that age. I know I sure as hell did, and retired long before I was 37. um Jeez. Now that I'm looking at it, it's like he seems to have played 82 last year. Tough to
Yep.
do. Oh, I want to say maybe, but I don't think. I think I got my. God damn it! It's got a little bit of Craig Berube, jam to him though. I'm starting to wonder if that
I
could
know.
fit in, but the age is tough. I don't know. I know we're coming up to JVR, and he's kind of my guy that I think could fit that role. I'm just gonna pass, but hesitantly pass. I think it's very interesting. But I think I've kind of got my guy I want to have come in and plug some holes. So I'm going to pass, but it is interesting to me.
Yeah, there's a reason I left the next guy to the to the end. In all honesty, Clutterbuck was a guy that we had kind of brought up briefly yesterday. Vic brought up I think you had kind of thrown it out there just quickly, and then I wrote it down on a list, forgot to add it into the sheet here, and then someone in the chat brought it up. So I wanted to see where you were at. I think if it's like a contract, leave it. PTO, I will take it. So
100%.
Vic, I don't know what you want to do with that, but PTO, take it. Like I'm in on that. Let's see what he can do if he comes in. But if you're gonna actually ask to sign, I will leave it. Let's move on and just not have to worry about that. I don't know. Let's get to the final one. You mentioned it. A possible reunion. James Van Riemsdyk. 35 years old, left hand, left wing, played last season with Boston, played a lot of games, 71 games played with the Bruins, 11 goals, 27 assists for 38 points. The 2 years before that was both with Philly. He played 61 games and 82 games. He had 29 points and 38 points respectively there. This is a guy I am actually interested in. I know that you talked about it just previously, so I'll let you take over here. But what are your thoughts on JVR and the idea of him coming back to Toronto?
Yeah, I like him. People don't, we've already had him here. You got to understand that he's not coming in to do the same role that he was asked to do in 2012 or whatever it was. He's a different player, but he's a high end player, a high IQ player, a high skill player, not to be William Nylander anymore, but to fill a different role. And he's good enough and experienced enough and high end enough that he can stay in the league and just reinvent his role a little bit. You can put him in the bottom 6, have him be, very responsible in his own end, have him do the right things, like have that veteran presence as far as being a responsible player out there. Maybe, you could put your wing over top of a guy that's coming in that doesn't have as much experience and help him out on the ice and kind of cover for him and give that really good support along the walls and those types of things. And then he's got, the pedigree to bury a few, to finish that play, to, he's still JVR. He's got talent. He's got skill. He's played in the league. He's probably got 1,000 games. And on top of that, he's a very well-liked guy in the locker room. Everyone that plays with him likes him. There's absolutely no character issues there from what I've heard. And I think he could be an addition, like you say, at $1 million to plug some of those holes. Because when you're looking at the forwards and shuffling things around, all of a sudden you could say, we're looking a little lean here. We're just looking like we're missing something. And he could come in and kind of make that a little bit more well-rounded and make the lineup look like it's kind of got some better depth to it.
I am all in on JVR. Take it. I'm taking it. Like you want to throw in as well, just thinking about it. Oh, is it going to be hard to convince him to take something, take a certain amount of money, take a 1-year deal? He played 1 year, $1 million with the Bruins last year. Like he's going to be looking for a Stanley Cup. He's going to be looking for an opportunity to go win that with the team. You'd think that most players are looking at the Leafs as a competitive team who could be pushing and knocking at the door at some point here. Maybe you could be the guy to help them get over the top. Maybe you're the guy on the fourth line, the third line who steps up in the playoffs, who could help out on the second power play, whatever it is. I think he'd be willing to do it. I think he'd be willing to accept that money and come here and play. Made enough money in his career. Also, we talk about Mike Hoffman as being the power play specialist. I think he's kind of looked at as only a guy who's going to do that, or a guy who's going to only be the power play guy. JVR, I'm not bringing him in here to fix the power play, but guess what? He can play on it. He played in the Bruins power play. He played in the first unit at times. He played in the second unit. He was rather effective in both those spots. I'm willing to take that. I also think that there would just be a little bit of that, connection back here, like Luke Schenn returning home when it was made a big deal and everyone was all fired up about Luke Schenn being here. I feel like we could see that with a guy like JVR returning. So I will take it. I will take JVR back here to Toronto. So there you go. There's our take it or leave it. The chat seemed pretty divided on most of these. It was a hard no to Matt Martin. It was a hard no to Mike Hoffman. But as far as Pacioretty, JVR, and Clutterbuck went, it was fairly back and forth on these guys. So
yeah, I could see that.
interesting to see. Yeah.
I could see that. It's we're not talking about slam dunk no brainers, right? We're trying to there's no slam dunk no brainers left at this point in the season if you're trying to fill a role, and those guys are pretty viable options considering where we're at in the season and free agency and everything like that. So I think we were pretty reasonable on our takes as why this would be something you could try and why this is something we're not interested in. But at the end of the day, the ones that you take, they're not slam dunk no brainers. There are some risk involved with the aging process and how much jam do these guys have left in the tank, and then also injury prone players. Are they going to be healthy the whole time, or are they going to be sitting in the press box? So that's always a risk you take at these points, but we're not talking about slam dunk no brainers right now.
Yeah, that's one of the other things why I was looking at JVR and actually really like that. Looking at the games played, 71, 61, 82. Like he's playing a lot of minutes here, or a lot of throughout the season at least, logging a lot of ice time. So at this age where he's at, I'm good with that. Like let's bring him in, give him a shot, and maybe just bring something out of him with these guys and throw him onto that third line, bring in a veteran guy. Let's get to our line combinations before we get out of here, Rosie, before we wrap things up. We'll start line by line. So I'll go with you because ours are pretty similar. We've reviewed that. We sent them back and forth in the chat with each other ahead of time. I want to first and foremost look at the first line. We have one difference which affects both the first and the second line. So I'll let you start. What is your first line for the Toronto Maple Leafs in the 2024-2025 season?
Well, with lines, I'm never married to them. I know that you try to find the chemistry, and once you find it, you stick with it. But we're starting with a fresh slate here. We don't know who's going to be doing what. But if you're going to start it off, I think Nyes on the left wing. I'm a big Matthew Nyes fan. Power forward, big body, go get the puck, and then get it to these other two guys in Matthews and Marner, and let them do their magic. Get in front of the net, be a big body, be a screen. Let Marner and Matthews do their job, and go and get the puck for them. I think that could work out really well. That's my top line to start the season.
The only difference I have from you is I'm switching, which we will lead us into the second line here. Marner with Nylander. So I'm putting Nylander up on that first line, Marner on the second line. And the main reason for me is I've not really ever liked Tavares and Nylander playing together. And to kind of just go back to that and say, hey, we're going to give it another shot with these guys on this group. It's not really where I want to be starting the season with that idea in mind. I would rather look elsewhere. I think Marner and Tavares were also the best season Tavares has ever had in the NHL. I think that was one of the best years Marner has had with this Leafs team, reuniting those guys. And then just kind of the only thing is that with that, I don't know how well Matthews and Nylander would work out together over the course of a full season, but it is nice. It is Matthews, and then it is Nylander on that right side for me. Going down to the second line, I'm going Marner, Tavares, and then I think a guy that you've got here as well, Bobby McMahon in that second line left wing spot.
Yeah, and I'm okay with interchanging Nylander and Marner. I think they are interchangeable. Try to find that secret sauce. Try to figure out, what Berube wants and how he wants to play. And I mean, these types of players aren't going to be changing the way they look at the game real drastically based on what the coach is trying to do. Honestly, those types of players kind of do what they do. But you're just trying to find that chemistry, and whether it's Marner or Nylander, I don't care. But yeah, I have McMahon, Tavares, and Nylander on the second line. And I'm a Bobby McMahon fan, good Alberta boy. I love it. But if you're trying to win a Stanley Cup and he's, in your top six, I think there needs to hopefully be some kind of an adjustment potentially. Like, I just don't think that's deep enough. We'll see what he can do. If he wants to make a huge step and really step up and play with those big boys, that'd be fantastic. But I just don't think it's quite the pedigree to be on a Stanley Cup contending team on the second line. So it kind of concerns me.
Well, this is where we kind of get into the third and the fourth lines here. And I think that this could potentially change as the season goes on, because you and I are talking about where are we at game one, like October 9th against the Habs, where are we at? I think that's kind of where we're looking at. I think as things progress and maybe we see some players develop, maybe even McMahon develop, maybe he does step into that role and become a great second line player, a guy who can fill in there and just fit alongside Tavares and whoever the right winger is. But as we bump down to the third line, I'm looking at some type of combination. And again, I think all three of these guys would be fairly interchangeable across the positions as well. But Max Domi, Easton Cowan at center. And I know you have an argument for maybe why not at center. And I think it's fair. But then on the other side, Calle Yarncroke. That's your third line. And where I'm kind of getting to with this is maybe Easton Cowan, maybe this kid shows up and he's a stud. And they say he's got to play on the second line.
It's possible. I mean, I just think that this kid has taken so much strides in the last 12 months, where he came and had a phenomenal camp last year and stood out. And since then, I think he's gotten drastically better. I think his confidence is through the roof. I think he's the type of player that wants the smoke, and he wants to be in Toronto. He wants to be on the team. You can't go play in the American League. And I think he's completely outgrown the Ontario Hockey League. I don't think you're doing him a big service. The scare is that you're going to put a kid into the big glitz and glamour and spotlight and media driven city of Toronto on the Maple Leafs. Everyone's going to make a big deal about it, and it's going to, not go perfectly well. It's tough to make that jump. It's a huge jump from the Ontario Hockey League to the NHL. And if he stutter steps a little bit or takes a step back, do they jump on him? Does the media? I think if the media is anything but stupid, they should give this kid lots of room, not put the pressure on him, not, put a spotlight on him if there's a mistake or a tough game, and let this kid get his feet under him. But the worry about putting a young kid in the NHL is that if he takes a step back and if he gets his confidence hurt, you could kind of hurt him for a year or two until he, starts to regain his confidence. You don't want to put him in the spotlight too early, especially in Toronto. So that is the worry. But I'm of the thought process that he is ready and he is mature and he is that stud level player that can do it and wants to do it and is chomping at the bit to do it. So I agree with that. And I kind of have him on the wing with Domi in the middle. Domi's going to have to be responsible and help out. Yarny is and will be, but Cowan on the wing, it's a little bit less responsibility. You can get your feet under you, just really focus on the wall, getting it in and out, finding your support on the wall and getting the puck out of your end, and then go to work in, the neutral zone transition and getting into the O zone. I think he can handle that. And if he can and becomes what he could be, I think that looks like a pretty nice little third line.
I agree. I would be excited to see it too. It would be like a fast, skilled, high paced line. You'd get some responsibility out of Yarncroc. You'd probably force Cowan to be in a little bit of a more responsible position. Trying to play back defensively. Make sure you're going to take care of your own zone. I would be okay with that. I think it would be fun to watch. I think it could bring some energy, some excitement as well. And we're both on the same page there of what we see that line looking like. Now going to the fourth line, I don't think that there's much discussion here between the two of us in terms of what we're going to see. It seems to just make sense. In my opinion, you're going to have Holmberg, Kampf, and Ryan Reeves. That line is going to be rotating throughout the course of the season. I think you're going to have a guy like Connor Dewar sitting on the outside, waiting to hop in. Maybe at some point you're going to have someone who's going to maybe have an injury or maybe just be tired and need a day off, because you're going to have a guy who's older like Ryan Reeves and has dealt with injury issues, who's going to need a night off, maybe need a week off, and another guy can jump in there. Those are the guys that I see in the bottom four, and that's kind of how I see that playing out. You're in the similar position here, Rosie, aren't you?
Yeah, I think with what we have to work with, that kind of just is where the chips fall, and Holmberg and Dewar can be interchangeable there, and we'll see how it goes. But my question, to put you on the spot, say we do get a JVR or a Pacioretty, where do you see that slotting, and who gets bumped around on that lineup we just constructed?
So I think that where you probably end up with these guys first to start is going to be a third line left wing position,
Mhm.
which I think would be very interesting, because I feel like the guy who's going to come out of this lineup to make that happen is probably Easton Cowan. Like, if you're bringing in one of those guys, you're bringing in a veteran guy, unless he blows you away in camp, it feels like he'd be pushed down just because of the reliability or trust factor that you have with Holmberg, Kampf, Dewar, Reeves. Like, it's not what I want to happen, but it feels like that would be the path where we're at.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I'm looking at Bobby McMahon, like just 66 games in the NHL, not a ton um, of experience at 28 years old. I guess he just turned 28. I mean, I know he had 15 goals last year, had a pretty solid little season for sure. 21, that was on the Marlies. I'm like, why is he the one that's, glued to the top six? What if,
Yeah.
depending on how Easton does and how he's handling it, like maybe he's just one of those guys that's just Teflon, where the pressure and the scrutiny and the media just water off a duck's back. The kid doesn't care. He seems like a smiley little bulldog that just wants to go out there and rip. And maybe he just steps in and does that. Guys do that sometimes. And then all of a sudden, does McMahon get shuffled down or get down to the fourth line, and then you can put maybe Cowan and see if he can play with Tavares and Neal. I know I'm putting a lot on the kid's shoulders right now. That's kind of the question mark. But if you add that piece and Cowan makes the team, and you add a veteran guy, I feel like your problem now is a good one. Like, where does everybody fit, as opposed to, well, who the hell are we going to go get? Which
Mhm.
is a better problem to have. And keep in mind, if you keep Cowan off the bat, he doesn't necessarily have to be there all year long. So it's an interesting thing. I think the more bullets you have to try, the better, rather than looking lean and thin and not having anyone to go to. I'd rather have the problem of figuring out who you take out than having no one to put in.
It is an interesting problem. It's a good problem, but an interesting one, because it starts to feel like trying to figure out a Rubik's cube, because not every guy or every position can slot around so easily. Do you want Domi playing center? Do you trust him playing center? Can you only have him on the wing? Are you willing to allow Easton Cowan to take on that responsibility of the center position? Is he going to be ready for the second line minutes, the second line defensive pressures, the second line matchups that he's going to face? Like, there's a lot of those things that could go on there. Maybe he is good at center. Maybe now you're going to want him in your 3C because you're going to be slotted Matthews, Tavares, Cowan. Like, there's some of those things where you have to figure out, but
Can some
yeah,
of those veterans we mentioned, can they play center, or are they strictly wingers? I don't know if like Pacioretty or JVR plays much for center.
JVR strictly left wing, Martin strictly left wing, Clutterbuck I think could play center,
Yeah, I
I
like that.
believe, but like I think if you're gonna want him center, you're gonna want him fourth line, which is where you're gonna have a guy like Kampf. Uh
Now we're really blowing shit up.
Right? Like now we're just I just started looking at the lineup and thinking about these guys moving around. Like there would be a lot. The one that I could see the most logical, which you did say, and then the more I think about it, the more I could see it, is you get Cowan come in here and play really well. He goes to your second line left wing, and then you move like Domi over to the center, and then JVR Pacioretty goes to your third line left wing. Or maybe Cowan comes in and he is a stud center. What you do is you move McMahon down and maybe he plays your fourth line. Maybe he bumps out Holmberg and Dewar and he's there, or maybe those guys are above him, whatever. But then you take Domi and you put Domi up to the second line, and then you put JVR Pacioretty into your third line left wing. Ultimately, though, the one like kind of rule I would throw on it, and it's not like those guys can't do it, but where I would start is I cannot see JVR and Pacioretty being pushed past your third line. Like they would be
No, me
3-4. Like they're not going up above that. So it's who else in this lineup can go up there to make these things work.
And like you said, say you bump McMahon down to the fourth line. I know he wouldn't be happy, but then you have like some guy with some capabilities down there who can, do some things, create some things, have some puck possession. Domi's pretty interchangeable. I mean, he's had success with Matthews. He's going to be a little bulldog. I think he's going to be excited to play for Craig Berube. He's going to be buzzing. I think you could put him up there with Nylander and Tavares, and then all of a sudden you put the pieces around. You look at that, and all of a sudden we look pretty deep. All of a sudden, like on the high end side of things, on the positivity scale, if those things work out, if Easton Cowan works out, and if we bring in a veteran who works out and fills the role and stays healthy, all of a sudden we look pretty deep. And you roll lines, and Craig Berube has this philosophy of north-south, and everyone's doing it, like I picture the Florida Panthers and how they're just a machine that just churns it out night after night, making it so difficult for other teams with this identity of doing what needs to be done to win in the NHL this day and age. You start to looking like there's potential to have that. And I mean, I know that's looking through rose-colored glasses, but there's a lot of boxes checked in that roster construction and in that lineup and that forward set, where if things go right, it's like, man, if these guys come together and get a little bit of luck and get a little bit of chemistry and are coached well and all adapt to the system well and buy in, there's potential for it to be a deep looking forward lineup, which is kind of exciting.
Yes, I'm excited for the season to come. I'm excited for camp. I want to see how these guys are going to play out. I'm really interested to watch Minton and Cowan go into camp. These guys both made it out last year.
And no one's talking about Minton. Like, no one's talking about he is a year older than Cowan. And I think he maybe had a bit of a stutter step there in World Juniors, which kind of maybe knocked his stock a little bit. But there's potential there too. I just can't help but think that Cowan has taken that step and is
ready.
He's just a rocket down there in the Ontario League. And I just don't see any benefit of him going down there again. He took off this year and blasted off, and I think that's just his coming out party to say, I'm done with that league. I'm ready to be a man in a man's league, and we'll see, man. It's super exciting. I honestly, we talk about 35 days or whatever until the puck drops, but I'm excited just for camp to get going and see what's happening, see how guys are responding to Berube and getting in there, and then preseason, like what are we looking at? And once that starts to wind up, you start to look at more of a final roster construction of what this thing's going to look like. And puck drop opening night is just a super exciting time that's coming up pretty soon here.
Yep, 35 days away. Well, let's get into our final segment here as we wrap things up. It's time for the last call, brought to you by Bet365. Open an account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets. Yesterday, we were looking at what team Matthews would score his 400th goal against. So whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Rosie, I'm going back to Auston Matthews. I'm taking another look here, and I've seen like a lot of pressure being put on him. Oh, now he's going to wear the C. Now he's got all this other leadership responsibility. It's going to take away from things. Can he score as many goals? Can he put up as many points? Well, I headed over to Bet365. They've got his point total for this season set at 101.5, minus 110 on either side, the over, the under. He scored 107 points last year. I see this guy taking a step off of what he did last year and continuing it more. Every year we watch him, he seems like a more well-rounded player. He seems like he's adding more tools to his bag. He's finding more ways to score. It's not like I think he's going to score 70 goals again this year. Like, just lock it in. Don't worry about it. That's what it's going to be, or even 60 plus. But you have a season where he scores 55 again, maybe pushes up to 60 again. The way that he commands the ice, the way that he's taking over, I feel like we're just going to continue to see him become more and more dominant player, pushing up those point totals. You want to be in the conversations with Nikita Kucherov, Connor McDavid, Nathan McKinnon, Leon Draisaitl, and be one of those superstars, those tier superstars. Guess what? Those guys are putting up 120, 130, 140 points. You're putting up 107, right? And it's not even to scoff at 107. That's a lot of fucking points, man. But it's 107 points. You want to be in that conversation, those things are going to have to come. You're going to have to find more and more ways to take over games and win for your team. And the other thing is, I don't see the C being on his jersey as a detriment. This is a guy who walks with swagger. Like, this is a guy who walks with some confidence, and putting a C on his jersey, I feel like is just going to add to that. Like, I don't see this being more pressure or being more difficult for him to play. I feel like this is just another opportunity for him to be like, yeah, I'm the man. Like, I've got the C on my jersey. I was already the man in the city, in the Atlantic Division, whatever you want to look at. I'm scoring 69 goals in a year. Like, I am the guy, and I'm going to do it. I don't see this being a problem. I don't see it slowing down his play, his pace, nothing. I think he goes over 101.5 points, minus 110 there at Bet365.
Yeah, I would think the over too. I think the only thing that stops that is an injury problem or not playing enough games to get over it. It's the only way I see that happening. If this team comes together and is kind of clicking and playing a system that is having success in this day and age in the NHL, then I think, his assist totals would go up. I don't see him getting 70 goals. I mean, he could absolutely prove me wrong. He's that type of player, but I think over 100 and whatever it was, 1 or 2 there was the over under. I think he's going to get over that. Like you say, the big boys are putting up 115, 20 plus. And I have the idea that this year, this team is going to be less individual efforts and more of a team mentality where they're all kind of getting it together. And that's Matthews leading the charge there. I don't see a C being a detriment to him at all. He's got the confidence and swagger. He is the man, like you said. And I think this only just kind of reinforces that. Like, now you got that C and people are like, oh, he's got the responsibilities. Like, what do you think, he's got to like go to board meetings and shit like that? There's nothing crazy different that he's going to have to do. He wants to lead by example, and if someone needs to step up and say something at a crucial time, he can be the guy to do that if he so chooses. That's about it. He doesn't have to do anything wild and crazy. It's going to take away from his focus on actual scoring goals and playing hockey. So that takes kind of ridiculous to me when people say that, because I'm like, what do you think he's going to have to do that's going to take his mind away from hockey? It's not this huge overbearing burden to have the C on your shoulder. You don't have to do anything wild and crazy. So I see him hitting the over there. I'm surprised that number's that low, but I'm not expecting him to be this 75 goals or just crazy. I want him just to lead the charge with this team and to have everybody kind of like behind him as this army that's just coming through and they're all doing it together. I want it to be more of like a Maple Leafs dominance than a Austin Matthews dominance.
Yeah, I mean, what, like, yeah, you brought it up there. What is he going to do differently? What's he doing differently? He does media hits every single day. He goes into the media and answers the questions, whether it's in the scrum or it's on the press conference or it's on the podium after every single game. Like, he's doing a billion commercials here. He's the biggest spokesperson for the team. Like, nothing is changing. Nothing is changing. And usually you're adding a C to the guy's jersey or letter for kind of optics reasons. The guys that are the leaders in the room are the guys that are the leaders in the room. Like, that's not changing. No, there's no internal responsibilities that are changing to a degree that's going to hinder your play on the ice, in my opinion. I don't know.
No, I
can't see
agree.
it changing.
The media makes too big of a deal about it. He doesn't have to do anything drastically different. It's just kind of a statement to say, yeah, this is now my team. It always kind of was, but now it's on paper, it's on my jersey. And he'll continue to do the same things he's been doing realistically, and maybe just be a little bit more of a voice or vocal. And that just comes with maturity and more years in the league and being who he is. I don't think he's going to have any problem, being that voice if he needs to be. It's as simple as that. It's not this extra burden on the guy whatsoever.
All right, well, that'll do it for us here today, September 4th edition of Leafs Morning Take. Again, you can find us at the Leafs Nation 401 on YouTube, Leafs Morning Take, wherever you find your podcast. And make sure to check out theleafsnation.com. It has been a blast filling in for Nick here alongside you, Rosie, and producer Vic. Appreciate the effort put in behind the scenes for you guys to make this happen. Appreciate everyone who has tuned into the shows here. Nick will be back next week. You guys are back at it?
Yes, sir. He's back from his little European trompe-a-lomp, doing whatever he does. That kid, I'm sure he's got some stories. So he'll be back and he'll be ready to roar. But thanks for filling in this week, buddy. That was fun. I'm sure we'll have a few of these chats post-game this season, which I'm looking forward to.
Yes, very much looking forward to that as well. So make sure to like the stream here today, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications so you get notified when Nick is back next week and when I'm back for Leafs Nation After Dark. But it's all happening here right on the Leafs Nation. Thank you so much to everyone who's tuned in. We'll see you guys back here next week with Nick Alberga and Jay Rosehill, Leafs Morning Take.
Make sure to check out more of our content right here on the Leafs Nation YouTube page. We got long-form interviews, we got clips, we got epic rants by Jay Rosehill. We simply have it all. And don't forget, you can find out much more at theleafsnation.com. Thanks so much for watching.